So I am so excited, everybody, because I'm so excited. I cannot wait to introduce you to my friend of literally, I feel like a gazillion years, but this guy's a beast. His name is Dave Myrick. He used to be the head of sales for the Americas for United, where he had a $10 billion quota, and he was the senior VP of sales for Hertz. So this guy deals with big, huge dollars, and I'm so excited that he's taken some time to come and join me on this call today. Thank you so much. Welcome, Dave.
My pleasure. If I'd known all that, I probably should have asked for more money.
That's right. Exactly. But here's the most important part, and I want everybody to know this. Dave he is a beast. You're going to hear a lot from him, so you're going to hear a lot of good nuggets, so make sure that you've got pen and paper to take notes. But more importantly, when I say that he's my friend, Dave is the person who actually introduced me, told me that I should get into sales well over, Dave, what would you say, probably 32, 33 years ago?
5 years ago. 5 years ago.
We looked very different back then. I was all cute and stuff. Now, yeah.
I had dark hair.
That's right, exactly. So you and I have been friends. We've known each other. We've obviously known each other for a very long time. And so I'm super excited to just be able to share you with everybody else in my community in regards to some of the nuggets I know that you're going to share. So thank you once again for taking time out of your schedule. You're like the busiest retired guy I know, right? I was like, I need you to sit your ass down for a minute so we can do this interview.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So I appreciate it. All right. So let's get started. You're used to carrying billion. I mean, I'm always proud of my little $1 billion quota, but when you're in $10 billion quotas, like you got some stuff to share. So tell me a little bit about, in your opinion, Dave, what's really been the biggest change that you've seen in the sales profession over the last decade?
Well, I would say specific to the aviation industry, and then also in general, sales is like many things. It's in an evolutionary state, right? So Arthur Miller, recognized this in 1950 when he wrote Death of a Salesman. And that story talks about a person's struggle with the changing and evolving sales world and how he could fit in it. So sales has always been in a very evolutionary state. I think probably in the most recent years, the biggest driver of that has been really the advent of CRMs. So we've got customer resolution management systems now that allow us to have in-depth knowledge about our customers, as well as data. Right? So if you can harken back to a few years when you and I first started in sales, we had very little customer data.
No.
And we were actually pretty lucky if we could capture a company's year-over-year revenue growth.
Right, right. We had index cards, remember? Everything's written down.
Right. So now with technology and the big data, we have a really in-depth knowledge of our customers. So as opposed to kind of one point of contact, which it used to be in the old days, one point of contact within an organization, we have data that allows us to get to who are the key users within that organization. Can you create advocacy within those key users to help you further your sales process? So I would say, to me, the biggest change has come from the fact that we now have data that we didn't have before, which allows us to apply a more, and I hate to use the word scientific, because look, we're not in a laboratory, and we're not filling beakers here. But there is an aspect to sales, I think, that has come from a little less art and a little more science. So sales is still about relationships. Look, first and foremost, you have to be able to have relationships. But I think that as sales has evolved, relationships in and of themselves are insufficient to help you in today's selling environment. So if you think about the changes that our customers have gone through, in the travel space, for example, I won't bore you with too much of the details about travel, but it used to be kind of this very nebulous division. People didn't understand how you could capture some cost savings there. It probably fell up under shared services. The guy who ran the commissary for the company and ordered coffee also bought travel. Now you see that moving into more of a procurement model, which means salespeople have to be on their toes and have a better understanding of how you sell in that environment. So it's evolved from the Willy Loman days of, pat them on the back, give them a cigar and hope they like you, to now having a really good understanding through data of how to sell within an organization, what their needs are, what their opportunities are, and then what their opportunities for shared growth are as well.
And I love that. And you're right, and a lot of times, when you think about sales, so that's evolved and that's changed the game in a tremendous way, right? Because now you can go in, there's no reason not to know some of the basics before you actually meet with a prospect or a buyer or a customer. And yet I'm always surprised how many people don't know the basics before they meet with a prospect or a buyer. And so when you think about that, how would you talk about like sales training, right? Making sure that they're using their time correctly, the salesperson, and then more importantly, they're honoring the buyer's time correctly as well. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Sure. So the buyers have changed. I mean, like I said earlier, it used to be from, a shared services type of buyer to a procurement buyer. So if you can think for a moment about what those conversations look like, well, the shared services guy is probably a little more concerned about the end user experience, right? Because that's kind of what they get measured on. Is the coffee right? Is the commissary offering the right kind of food? Do they have the right travel partners aligned with them? Whereas the procurement guy, quite honestly, is all about commoditization. I mean, their existence in this world is really one thing, and is to commoditize what would be a non-commodity product, because once you commoditize it, then you can drive the cost of that product down. So what has happened is, I think that calls for a better equipped sales force to be able to have conversations that understand how companies buy along all their product lines, right? So, I mean, I can go into a customer today, and if I'm sitting in a $1,500 Herman Miller chair, and that customer says to me, price is the only thing that matters, I know that that's not necessarily the case. Now, price is always important. I get that. Price is always important. But what's really important is, how can I make sure that my offering is better than the next best alternative for that customer, based on a full suite of issues. And one of those issues being, how do they buy? What's important to them? How price sensitive are they? Where does price rank within their sales criteria? So first, I've got to do some background study, right? I need to understand what those companies do, how they buy, not just travel in this case, but how they buy across the suite of products. Because if I have a better understanding of that, I can do a better job of segmenting them into a customer type, and then I can offer the best product to fit that particular segment type. So give you a couple of examples. There's a really big retail chain that begins with a W, and quite candidly, price is the only thing that matters to them. So if I want to move some share in a company like that, that's all price sensitive, then I need a product that offers that. I need a contract that's very focused on price. But I may be able to save some margin on my side by cutting out some of the other things, some amenities that we may offer. The converse to that would be maybe a boutique law firm downtown Dallas, where many of their fees and expenses are going to be passed through. Well, they're probably less concerned about price and more concerned about customer experience. So I need to have a contract that's tailored to that particular company. So if I just go in and talk about price, that may intrigue them, but it's not really going to get them excited. And it's certainly not going to detail how I stand versus the next best competition as it relates to product offering. So again, the more data I have, the more information I have, the better I can understand my customers. Better understand my customers, the better I can actually tailor a product offering to them. So these things kind of get intertwined. The evolution of data has actually empowered our customers to be better buyers. Well, it should also empower us to be better sellers.
Exactly. And you know what? It's funny, because one of the things that I love, and I encourage people when I'm coaching them, is to go, learn the data, have the data, take the information that your company is providing for you, but also then do and then some, right? So, look at that company's financial statement, read the letter from the CEO to the board or the investors. That's going to tell you a lot of information, so that whoever you're meeting with is, you're living a day in their world. What's important to that organization beyond just your piece of the pie? But, are they going through a new leadership? Are they entering a new, global market? I mean, what is happening in a holistic viewpoint from that company perspective? Because that will give you much more insight in regards to behind the scenes, what are the leaders, what's keeping those leaders up at night? And then, of course, how can you serve them based on your product, your service, et cetera. So I like that.
I can tell you a great way to accomplish that, and we did this in my previous life, is we called them immersions. And they could either be a large 3-day event where we would take a company with $100 million in spend, and we would have a team that would go in and meet with different individuals, and we would connect our CEO with their CEO and our sales leader with their sales leader. So we would spend a lot of time immersing ourselves into that organization. You really only have the opportunity and time to do that with your largest customers, but you can do what we would call little mini immersions, where we would make sure that the salesperson had got deep and wide within the organization. And the nuggets of information that they can find out and you can glean from people can be very powerful, and also very important in having a better knowledge of where the company's going, what strategic changes they have in place, how your offerings can fit within that. It's really just about being a partner, right? I mean, so I can be a couple of things. I can be a guy that just hawks products. I can be a salesman in a traditional sense, or I can be a business partner where I have product offerings that actually very much align not only with what I do, but with how their organization is structured as well. So I kind of like the concept of immersing yourself either in a large scale or a small scale into your customer base.
And I like that. And so now let's talk about, because that requires training, right? And I know you and I have had this conversation offline a few times that, when you think about training, a lot of companies confuse product training with sales training. And so, when you're talking about immersing yourself into an organization, meeting at the different levels, whether it's a C-suite or what have you, a lot of that is also training for the salespeople so that you're not just pushing your product or not just rattling off features and benefits, right? But you're actually becoming a true partner, or I would say a trusted, advisor, that part of their inner circle, if you will. So talk to me a little bit about training. What frustrates you? Where would you like to see sales training? I mean, you've led obviously a lot of big dollars and big teams. So what's your thoughts?
Actually was responsible for sales training in my early career. So look, I have a soft spot in my heart for sales training. The part that frustrates me most is I think many companies, especially those who are very operationally driven, I put the airlines in there, huge operation. I mean, you can.
I remember 7 cents for the yield. Yeah. Good guy.
So companies who tend to be very operationally focused tend to spend a little bit of less time on sales and sales training. And I understand that. I think they look at sales as something they don't quite understand. Don't invest a lot into it. Don't expect a whole lot out of it. But I've got multiple examples of where investment in sales actually adds margin to the organization. So, but to go back to the thing that kind of frustrates me most about training is I would say the part that where people tend to look at sales training as an event.
Preach. Oh, say that again. Preach, my brother. Let the church say amen.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
And again, I think it comes from a lack of understanding about sales and what sales training can actually contribute to the company's bottom line. So in the past, especially, sales training tend to be an event that you checked off a calendar. And to me, sales training is really about trying to bring about change. Well, if you think about change, forget about sales training for a second. If you just think about change in general, well, change comes from repetition. Right? And repetition comes from coaching. So, to send someone to an event where, I've heard studies that say, you go to a sales training event, you may take 10 to 15% of that out in terms of retention. So to expect people to, on their own, retain more than they normally would, and then also on their own, figure out how to implement what they've just learned into their day-to-day lives, that's a pretty big ask for people with very busy agendas. So, my approach to training has been less about, event-based training and more about coaching, right? So I tend to look at sales as an apprenticed skill, all right? I mean, if you're a fighter pilot, there's no gray areas. You are trained for specific things at specific times, and it's very regimented. Well, sales is a little bit not quite that strict, right? I mean, there are many ways of being successful in sales. So to me, the most successful people I've seen in sales are those who had actually very strong apprenticeship. And so the apprenticeship really comes back to, did I have mentors that I could replicate behavior? Did I have coaching to help me better understand what my strengths are, how to play to them, what my weaknesses are, how to downplay them? So successful training to me, it can be event-based. That's great. If you want to have a little something to kick off this new change in mentality that you're trying to create. If you really want it to be sticky, it's got to be ingrained in your day-to-day. So that comes with, do your KPIs reflect what you're trying to train to? Does your compensation support what you're trying to train to? Does your managerial structure allow your leaders to actually spend time coaching such that the training is then sticky and effective? And so if you don't have those things, you may be able to, improve yourself marginally through what I would call kind of classroom training. But there's so many other opportunities out there now to improve Salesforce. Online stuff, mentorship classes, leadership classes, executive seminars. There's a lot of things that can actually help you drive towards that kind of outcomes you're trying to drive to. They're above and beyond just a 3-day training seminar.
Right, exactly. This is me dropping the mic.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you very much. That was fantastic. You're 100% right.
I've been through hundreds of those in a career.
Yes.
And I can tell you nuggets that I've taken out of training, but I'm not sure if I were to compare the change in my career or aptitude or whatever you want to call it, measure what I learned in training and compare that to what I learned through mentorship. It's 10-to-1 towards coaching.
Yes.
Again, we're not filling beakers here in a laboratory. It's sales. It's a combination of art and science. We talked earlier about the science part of it being very much data driven, but the art part of it is, do I have the kind of mentorships to help me understand how to think as a business person? How to make sure I'm penetrating my corporate accounts well, all my customers well, distributors. And if I see that in real life, it tends to be a little more sticky than like I said, a 3-day training seminar from 1988.
Exactly. I've turned down gigs. I remember I had a client or a prospect call me recently and they said, Steph, you came highly recommended. We're off by quota by $100 million. And we wanted to see if you can come train the sales team. And so I was like, okay. So I'm thinking, like coaching and mentoring and a whole process. No. We just want you to come in for 45 minutes and, do a speech. And I said, okay. I said, to be honest with you, I'm not the person for you. There's no way you're going to get that $100 million gap, right? I'm good, but I'm not that good. I can come and talk for 45 minutes and magically it happens. It doesn't work that way. And to your point, Dave, that goes to show, no wonder you're $100 million off. You're not investing in your people on a daily, a daily routine and a daily discipline. And so, I'd rather not take their money in a case like that because I know it's not going to give them what they need in order to get the result. And I got my own reputation to, at hand at this point. So it's one of those things that I'm hopeful that the industry will change as far as a sales professional, that we're not burning and churning salespeople, throwing them out there, giving them, one thing and hope it sticks and then be upset when they don't know how to hit that quota because the quotas are getting bigger. I was reading a stat recently. Sales training dollars are going up. So more companies are spending more money to do sales training, but sales efficiency is going down. Right. And so to your point, it really isn't a one-hit wonder. It's not come in, inspire them for 40 minutes and then poof, everything works. It doesn't work that way. It is a daily, any kind of coaching, mentoring, it really is changing behavior is a daily discipline. It doesn't just happen once a year. I've
seen that. And where I've run into that in the past is especially those companies who are very operationally driven. We talked about airlines, right? So, most of in previous days, most of the leadership in airlines actually came from the ground up. Started loading bags in 1948 and you're the president of the company in 1979. So there's all this, and look, I get it. It's an operationally driven organization. Think about trucking. So my guess is if you're a trucking line, you don't spend 45 minutes a year teaching your drivers safety protocol.
Right.
Right? You probably spend a lot of time because that's very important to the organization. So I think people, if you don't have a clear understanding of what sales is or what sales can do, then you tend to look for the quick fix. I will say that I've also had the luxury of working for, senior leadership at the CEO and president levels who had a real clear understanding of what sales was and was not, and what an investment of sales could actually do to the organization. And we have lots of proof points throughout my career of where, we did the right thing and we actually created margin accretive deals for the organization. So then suddenly we earn a seat at the table, right?
Yes.
So it feels like this self-fulfilling prophecy. We want people to have a greater deal of respect, I guess, for lack of a better term. We want people to invest more into sales in their companies. But until we prove to them that investment is going to create a return, it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So the greater we are as salespeople, the more we train, the more we coach, the better sales effectiveness we demonstrate, the more resources we get. So the 45 minutes then turns into a couple of days. And then the couple of days turns into, a coaching session where you're now Johnny Appleseed, right? You're teaching people to teach. So the most effective organizations I've seen are those that fall in that latter category. They have a better understanding of what an investment in sales can do. They have eschewed the 45-minute seminars and actually are investing time in coaching and leadership development.
Absolutely.
You see that a lot in kind of what I would call newer industries, the tech world.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
They have a clear understanding of what sales, how important sales is. It's those kind of tried and true industries where I think they need more demonstration of what investment in sales can actually create for the organization.
Exactly. No, I couldn't agree with you more. I really couldn't. That was perfectly said. And so I made a comment earlier saying you're like the busiest retired guy I know, right? So how do you keep, but you're in sales and sales is great, but it can be a grind, right? How do you keep yourself, in peak performance? Or even when you had teams, you can answer it either way. How did you keep your team in peak performance?
So first, I make sure that the role and the KPIs and the goals of the sales organization were very closely aligned to that of the organization at large. Right? Yeah. So what I mean by that is if you have a sales organization that doesn't have much investment, and it's usually because you're not very well aligned with the remainder of the organization. So first and foremost, I make sure that as the company changes, my sales division changed with it. Right?
Yes.
So that's all about having a good understanding internally of where your organization is. You get that by creating a seat at the table. I will tell you that at one part of my airline career, sales was just considered something you did, and no one really quite understood it. And gosh, they seemed like really nice guys. If you want to have a golf tournament, that's the first guys I'm calling.
Yeah, right. The necessary evil. Yeah.
But then over a period of time, I worked for leaders who understood that an investment in sales, as I said earlier, can really improve the margins of the organization. And so the better we did, the more we were respected. The more we were respected, the more time we got at the strategic table. Right? So one of the things that I really like to see is companies who either have a sales leadership team or have taken sales leadership and ingrained that into the strategic conversations within their organization. Because then I know what I'm doing is very well aligned with the leaders of my company. So that's kind of the internal. I want to make sure that I am we talked about networking earlier. We talked about networking within our customers and doing immersion. Well, you got to network internally as well.
Yes.
Make sure that you have a clear understanding of what your organization is doing and how sales can support that. So that's one way. And I think the other thing you can do is look, I always like to seek out kind of best in class, and not particularly in my industry. So I try to do some, I'll go to different seminars, and there's some industry things you can do, GBTA, NBAA, which I know you're both familiar with as well. You can, there's things you can attend there to help make sure that you're staying at the cutting edge of what the industry is doing. Then I would also say, look outside your industry, look at other industries that have best in selling or best in class selling organizations. So I'll go back to early in my career in the 80s, and airline sales was really just in its infancy. We looked at Xerox. Now, you may not look at Xerox today because but back then Xerox had a real clear understanding of what sales could do to the bottom line, and so they really had this tremendous investment in the sales. So early in my career, we tried to replicate some of the training and development things that Xerox did because they were considered kind of best in class at the time. So whether it's Xerox in 1980 or Apple in 1990 or 2017, try to seek those best in class organizations. Take some nuggets. What do they do? How do they sell? How do they go to market? How do they train? How do they coach? And are there some nuggets that you can take from there that would be applicable to your industry? So I think that's a way of kind of staying on.
Staying ahead of it. That's right. Exactly. And one thing that you said that I really liked is the networking part. So as sales leaders, you have to network within the organization. So, I always saw it sales leadership when I had teams to lead is getting, it's almost block and tackle. So you're trying to clear the way so the salespeople can do their job, because everyone tends to say, well, sales can run that report, but let's have sales do this. Let's have sales do that. And before you know it, your salespeople are spending 70% of their time doing things that don't actually produce any revenue for the organization or for themselves. And so, clearing the way so that they weren't bogged down with administrative stuff that needed to get done. But then the other part of the role was networking, to your point, internally, so that everyone did understand what sales was doing. And then on the flip side as well is making sure that the sales team understood what is it that you actually sell. And, I'll give you an example. When I was on the private jet side, for a long time, the salespeople, their quota was really just about sell this many planes, right? But the fact of the matter is, as an organization, we made money a lot of different ways. So yes, we made some money from the asset. That's one way. We made money from fuel. We made money from maintenance. We made money from managing the aircraft. We made money a lot of different ways. And so if the salespeople don't know that, then they're just focused in on that one quota, sell more planes. But if they know the business that the business is in, then that puts them in a different predicament when it comes time to negotiate the one asset, right? Because if they know, well, no, there's a lot of different pieces attached to this thing, that just makes them better negotiators, and it increases their own business acumen, which makes them, to your point, when you now pull them back to the seat at the table, they know what they're talking about, not just their quota. They should know their quota, of course, but, how does finance work? How does, sales tends to think of finance as the sales prevention department, right? And so, but why does finance say, no, they can't pay 45 days when they need to pay in 30? Why do they say that? Well, once you understand what does those extra 15 days mean to the bottom line of the organization, that way the salespeople are now equipped to be in a better position to make and represent the company better, and not discount and not give stuff away, because they understand the business as a whole. So I love what you're saying. There's so much opportunity for that just within it, each organization.
Sure. And immersions aren't necessarily always external, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you need to immerse yourself in your own organization first and foremost.
Yes, exactly.
You have a better understanding of all these different opportunities out there. And look, it's kind of the same thing we talked earlier about data. The more information I have, the more impactful I'm going to be. So in the private jet space, if I may be trying to sell an airplane, but if I have a better understanding of what my customers are purchasing across other lines, if I can connect to those as well, I have a better chance of selling them this product if I have a better understanding of how they buy other products. So it's all kind of ties into it. I think it's agnostic to industry. Yeah. The concept is the same across all industries.
Yeah, I agree. And so kind of our closing comment.
Although airlines are fun.
Yeah. When you get to fly for free, right? It was great doing that when we were back in our, back in the day, right? Now, when I think about how my career, and I'd be on a plane and here and doing that and doing this, and now I'm like, this old girl will be like, whoa, wait a minute. Okay, I need to rest for a second,
It was fun then.
It was fun then when I had the energy. But kind of in closing, and again, I want to be respectful of your time. I know that you've got some little kids waiting on you in regards to the charity that you work with. But tell me in a nutshell, in your opinion, what are some resources that you'd like to recommend in regards to for sales leaders? What could they do? Because we know that sales leadership is, it can be a very lonely place, right? You've got to carry these, $10 billion quotas, big numbers. And so, what are some things that you would recommend for sales leaders?
So you're talking specifically for the leadership side of it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. Just kind of our closing question, just any advice you have as a person.
Yeah, well, look, I think it's similar to what we've been talking about earlier, how well are you networked? So some of the things that have been impactful to me weren't particularly formal leadership training, but networking and workshops and things of those lines that allow us some in a formal, some in a casual setting, which allow you to spend time with peers, kind of spitballing ideas about other industries. And so actually recently I was participating in a workshop that was a roundtable discussion. It had different small business leaders from different organizations, none of which were very similar. In fact, not at all similar. You had a guy running a dry cleaners, another guy running a restaurant. So nothing similar. What we found through that workshop was that while the industries may be quite different, the problems and opportunities were actually very similar. Right? Yeah. So things that one industry was doing actually were very much transferable to other industries. So I really think there's tremendous value in what I would, for lack of a better term, workshops. Now those things can take many facets. They can be, kind of a one-day roundtable discussion with different people from different industries, as I just described. There's great opportunity for online that are very, very cost-effective, that allow people to kind of do the same thing in a very cost-effective fashion. So whatever venue you choose, whether it be online, in person, I really think, like I said earlier, it's an apprentice skill, and I think that apprenticeship comes in many forms. It can come in the terms like a boss, or it can come in the form of a peer. So I really like workshops that allow you to get into that as well. So
I love that.
Opportunities to do that online as well.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And I know in our world, in the sense of, the neuroscience selling, which obviously I'm very passionate about, we're passionate about it because we usually just have neuroscience selling really just kind of for the Fortune 100, kind of companies. my partner and I, Dr. Judith Glazer, she's a neuroscientist, crazy, so we're actually going to open up neuroscience selling to a lot more organizations, because to your point, we believe that, sales leadership, it's a tough job. Sales is a tough job. And so how do we give them that competitive advantage? And by understanding that the buyer, because you mentioned it earlier, the buyer has changed tremendously. But we have so much more understanding of how the brain works, at a cellular level from a conversation. And at the end of the day, sales really is about a quality conversation, so that the buyer feels like, hey, I trust you, you get it, you can help me, and now I'm willing to give you money to put forth, for me to get to that next place. So there's so much more, to your point, that we can gain from each other, whether it's through workshops or through, mentorships or what have you. But there's a real opportunity for taking it to the next level. You don't have to be by yourself out there. And more importantly, you really can give your salespeople the tools that they need in order to not just hit the quota once in a while, but, exceed the quota consistently, right? Because that then, changes everything for everybody, actually.
And it's funny when you talk about neuroscience selling. So we started the conversation talking about the evolution of sales, right?
Yes.
So can you imagine in the 1950s world of Arthur Miller, where Willie Loman someone talks to him about the scientific aspect of sales?
Yes.
Exploded. But think about that, that's where we are today, right?
Yes.
So neuroscience is actually a part of the selling process.
Yep.
And, we're having conversations today about that aspect, the mental aspect of sales, as opposed to just the relationship side. So we kind of started it. Sounds like we've gone full circle into talking about truly effective salesmanship is about the art as well as the science of it. So when you can combine those together, you get a pretty potent cocktail.
That's right, exactly. And just a simple plug for those of you who want to know more about neuroscience selling, check me out on my website, stephaniechung.com, and you'll hear more about it. And I know Dave's a big fan of it as well. So you, my friend, it's always nice to see you. Thank you so much for taking the time. And real quick, tell the people who might be interested a little bit about the charity that you work with kids with autism and horses.
Yeah, so since my retirement, my third attempt at retirement, I've been volunteering at a company called Shea, and it's a hippotherapy. So we basically use it's equestrian therapy. Hippo is Greek for horse. So it's hippotherapy. We use horses. I actually bought a horse and donated her, and we use her to help children with autism, multiple sclerosis. We actually have some military clients with PTSD. So if you would like to donate, it's a very worthy cause. Go to theshaycenter.com, make your donation.
Awesome.
And you would be surprised at the progress some of these children can make with the assistance of a horse. I grew up with horses. I never understood the therapeutic value, but it is absolutely amazing to watch a child with autism struggling to speak, and 6 months later being able to speak, just because he's actually around a horse, and it kind of changes brain waves. And there's a neuroscience to riding horses too.
I love it. Well, continue to do great work out there. And of course, it's always nice to see you, my friend. And thank you so much for taking the time. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. Good talking to you.
You too. Bye-bye. Wow. Did you not love Dave? He was packed full of good information for sales leaders and salespeople. And the biggest takeaway that I gathered from what he was saying is really something that I believe wholeheartedly in. The 21st century has commanded that we change the way that we sell. The buyer is no longer the same buyer from back in the day. They have a lot more information and a lot more resources to actually know before we even meet with them, before we talk to them, before they engage with us. They have a pretty good understanding of what they know and need, and also what it is that we have to offer. So now it really comes down to the quality of the conversation and the analytics that we can do to be prepared before we engage the customer. So if there's anything that I can do to help you be just better in your arena when it comes to having a better close ratio, or just having a better conversation with your salespeople, if you're a sales leader, or your prospect, if you're a salesperson, I'd love to help. We're here to help any way that we can. Feel free to just hit me up on LinkedIn and let me know. You're always welcome to shoot over a question, or if there's anything we can do or you want more information on specifically neuroscience selling and perhaps how we can help you take your team to the next level, check us out at stephaniechung.com.